Hello, Saltwater Nation. Joe Simons like diamonds. Luke,
And Luke Simons,
like
like Diamond.
diamonds. We're talking about how much does it cost to get into saltwater fishing, in particular, inshore saltwater fishing. This is a question we get a lot of obviously newer people, whether they're new to fishing altogether or maybe have been pretty good bass anglers like we were and making that transition over to inshore saltwater fishing. That question does come up like, man, what do I really need to succeed? What do I need at a basic level, which we'll talk about? What do I need once I get a little bit better? What do I need once I maybe move from shrimp, right? That's where most people start, right? Just some live or frozen shrimp. But what happens when I want to start using lures? Maybe you need a more sensitive rod or a better rod. You need different line. A lot of that stuff changes as you continue to progress. We'll kind of start at the bottom and move our way up. I will say before we get started, if you haven't picked out or picked up a flea flicker, that is our latest and greatest bait, or our lure that there. Luke's got it right
Got
there.
one right here.
This thing is so cool. I'll let Luke you chime in on why this is so unique, but we've been testing this out for quite some time. Finally available. We're almost running out. These things went really, really fast at fishstrong.com, so make sure to pick yours up. It's the flea flicker. Luke, what is your 60-second elevator pitch on that?
Yeah, this is more for intermediate and advanced anglers. It's unique. It's a suspending plug, so a suspending twitch lure, and it's unique because it just has a slow sink, but it slinks with its head up. A lot of lures sink like this. This is the look of a healthy fish. This is the look of a fish that is on its last leg and is just gasping for oxygen. So this seems to get better strikes. We did a lot of testing, and just this small little change does seem to make an impact. And the fact that it's like this, as it sinks, it's going backwards. So it's going slowly backwards. And then when we twitch it, it goes forward, just like the flea flicker trick play in football. That's what got the name. So unique lure comes with a 100% satisfaction guarantee, like all of our lures. So yeah, if you're, again, intermediate advanced anglers, if you want to try out a new suspending twitch lure that is guaranteed to catch more fish, try it out. Fishstrong.com. And again, if you don't like it, we'll refund the money. No questions asked.
Yep, and it's got the two little fang marks on the back where it already looks like it's injured with some blood. It's a pretty awesome lure. Only at fishstrong.com. All right, so let's get into how much does it cost to get into inshore saltwater fishing. And I think it's probably important to start off with maybe the misconceptions slash mistakes. I'll kick off with a couple. You do not need to have a boat. Like you do not need to have a fancy anything just to have success, right? You don't have to have you probably see me on a prior podcast where I got my $900 spinning reel. You do not need that, nor should you buy that, especially if you're just getting started. It is
Nope, nobody
100.
needs that. Some people might want it, but nobody needs
Yeah,
that.
well said. You don't need the fanciest rod. You don't need all the fancy stuff that might get people excited. You don't need that to just have early success with inshore saltwater fishing. So I think that's what overwhelms people. And if you walk in any of the big box retailers, it's overwhelming for me as an experienced angler when you like I have to like dig through this many jig heads just to find the one I want. There's just so much stuff. I can only imagine if you didn't even know what a jig head was and looking at all these different options, how overwhelming it could be. So the point of this podcast is to simplify, starting kind of the bare bones minimum on what you need to succeed. What are some other misconceptions, Luke, on things that people might think they need that they really don't to get started?
Yeah, the misconception is that the answer involves purchasing some sort of physical product, some sort of equipment. That was my mistake. I became a good bass angler growing up in on a lake in Central Florida, and started going into saltwater and totally struggled, completely struggled. And I just assumed that my reel wasn't nice enough, so I went from like the $100 reels for freshwater to now getting some like the $200+ reels, and my results didn't improve a single bit. And I felt more shame than I did before because now I'm spending more money than I ever was, and I'm not having any better results. So before you buy anything, before you go to any store, buy anything, even from us or anywhere else, focus more on knowing fish behavior. Because once you do that, if you can put yourself in the right spot at the right time for whatever species that you're targeting, you're going to be catching fish, even if you have a $10 combo that has 10-year-old line and a old rusty lure. If you're in a good spot, odds are fish are going to hit it. I've done a lot of lure tests over the years, comparing different colors, even different lures altogether. And I have yet to have a trip where one lure caught a bunch of fish and the other lure caught nothing. So don't look at, if you're struggling, don't look at your lures, don't look at really anything until you make sure that you're putting yourself in a good spot. So that's rule number. I just wish somebody hit me over the head with that, 20 years ago. That would save me
Yeah.
thousands of dollars because
And
I
we,
was good.
oh, go for it.
I was gonna say I was just spending like all of my money for like mowing lawns through high school. It all went to rods and reels and lures to the point where I still have a ton of just stuff that's sitting around that is just building, like collecting dust. And again, none of those actually fix my problem. If only I spent time reading and watching educational videos, I would have saved a ton of money and more importantly a ton of time.
And for those of you fortunate enough to have gone through the interactive fishing school, you know that the very first video, right, regardless if you start in the beginner level, because it's essentially like a high school, right, or college, where you got kind of the freshman and sophomore, and then the senior as you kind of progress and learn more. And it starts off with the 90-10 zone. It's finding the fish is more important than any other stuff that we all get excited about. Everyone wants to talk about the rods and the reels, the different lines and different lures and shiny objects. But Luke nailed it. It's all about finding those fish first. And if you haven't gone through the interactive fishing school, please do it. All you insider members get free access to it. We're even talking about, giving some limited free access to non-members. So be looking for that if you're not. But just go ahead and join. It is worth the price of admission just to get that alone. And of course, you save money on the tackle that you do need to buy at some point to catch fish. Obviously, we're not suggesting you out there just hand lining it or hoping and praying that the fish jump in your boat once you find the right spot. But yeah, it's so critical. And I always use that example. It's so weird to me that fishermen, it's almost like we shoot ourselves in the foot. And I don't know if it's because of the word men in there, that men are embarrassed to ask directions or get help in general, but it's almost been like the only way to get better at fishing is time on the water, trial and error, years and years and years and years and years and years. And I can say that over and over again because that's how long it takes trial and error to really get good. And yet, every other sport, any hobby, like Luke, you're about to have a kid. I've got three that are all in different sports. Guess what? The one thing that is in common with all three of the sports that they're in right now is they have a coach and there are lessons that they go through to excel and get better, right? They all have a coach. They're all training. They're all watching videos, even at home. They're all doing little things to get better while they're not actually on the field. I mean, whether it's golf or tennis or baseball or basketball or swimming, any of that, there's always a coach involved. And yet, fishing, for some reason, until we kind of came along, it wasn't even a term, a fishing coach. I couldn't even find it when I Googled it. Now, we have full-time fishing coaches and now bring on a lot of part-time coaches to teach this stuff. And I don't want to go too far off the path here, but it does tie in with everything that we're teaching. If you need help, don't just go buy a bunch of stuff or don't think you have to go figure it out on yourself. Regardless if you join us or not, there are coaches out there. There are ways to get help. I believe ours is the most affordable and best by far in terms of our community and our coaches. And there's nothing else like it. But doggone it, don't do it the hard, old-fashioned way where you waste so much time and so much money. So all that being said, assuming we focused on finding the fish, what's next? What do I need at the bare bones minimum to get into inshore saltwater fishing? To go catch just some, let's not talk about a trophy fish or any of that, but just to get some tight lines.
Yeah, so and we'll kind of follow the fishing school kind of segments, and so we'll start with beginners. And so the goal here, just to be clear, so the beginner goal is just to go out and catch fish, and just go out and have a fish catching story, and not have the shame of spending an hour or 2 hours or worst case even more and not catch anything. That's the worst. So this is the most guaranteed way I've ever found to catch something. The cool thing is that it doesn't cost much at all. So it starts with knowing where the fish are. In most cases, just finding a nearby bridge. We're just starting the simplest way possible. This is actually how we got addicted to fishing at a young age. Our parents would take us to a nearby bridge. It was in between Lake Lincoln and Lake Otis. That's where my dog's name came from. And there's just bridges are often a great place for fish, regardless of species. Any ambush predator, sea trout, redfish, snook, bass, and brim that we grew up with on the freshwater, but sheep's head, snapper, ever. There's a ton of stuff will hang by bridges because there's often going to be current flow for tidal areas. Obviously, that current is constricted. And basically, you find current flow and structure, there's going to be life. And bridges have just easy access. There's oftentimes public parking near them. You can usually fish from them, or at least fish near them. And so, if that's the goal, it's going to go out and catch fish. You don't need anything fancy fishing from a bridge. You can literally just drop the line on a hand line and have no rod and reel, as long as you get some live shrimp and some small hooks. We even just recommend just regular eagle claw J hooks, and we have them in our store. We can put a link down below. You get like 10 for $1.50 or something like that. It's crazy cheap. I've caught keeper snook on those that they catch just as many fish as those more expensive, owners and all the others where you get like a seven for like $4. But yeah, just keep it simple. You don't need to get fancy. Just get some fishing line and an ability to get a live shrimp on the bottom near structure with current flow, and you're going to the odds of catching nothing are extremely low. If you want to upgrade ahead of hand lining, which I would recommend,
Yeah.
you can just go to like Walmart and get like a 40 $50 combo that like comes pre-spooled with line. You don't have to worry about learning how to spool line. Again, just to keep it as simple as possible while still getting results.
And
Get a
you
cheap
meant
combo. Go
the
ahead.
one thing you forgot on that in terms of just making sure they have the full rig is some sort of weight, right? Some sort of
Yeah.
bullet weight, depending on the depth and the current. But that's it, right?
Yeah.
That's the whole rig is the shrimp, that little small eagle claw was size one hook or something, and a weight.
Yeah, and so to learn how to, and there's a way to rig shrimp weedless, which is what I recommend doing. This is what I do by myself when I'm grocery shopping, meaning when I'm going out like trying to catch sheep's head or snapper for dinner. Well, I'll get live shrimp and tear the tail off and rig it weedless, where I can pitch docks and bridges and get right up against the structure without getting snagged and still catch a ton of fish. And so that requires those eagle claw hooks. And just I use bullet weights, like the same bullet weights that I used to use for bass fishing. You can get them at like any tackle store, like Walmart's have them. And again, it costs nothing, it costs hardly anything. So you could literally get in the game for under $60, all included, including a dozen live shrimp, and go out there and catch some fish. And this is a whole lot of fun, even for kids or for any age. I have a blast just dropping stuff by bridge because freshwater was fun. Like growing up, we caught got a good amount of bass and mostly brim, but every once in a while bass would hit the worm. That we would dig up worms in the yard and throw it. But with saltwater, it's way more adventurous. Where one cast you can catch like a little snapper that's 4 inches, and then the very next one you can hook into a 4+ foot tarpon. Right, like you just never know what it's going to be, and so that's why like, for somebody getting started, I'd recommend doing that. Like keep it simple.
Hmm.
Don't buy a bunch of gear where you feel shameful if it doesn't work, and just find structure with current flow in at least 5 feet of water, ideally like 7 or more, and get that shrimp on the bottom close to structure without getting snagged. And again, the odds of coming home without a fish story is very, very small. So
Yep.
again, that's another thing I wish somebody would have told me, that simple strategy. It doesn't have to be a bridge. If you find a dock or even a rock jetty, like any sort of hard structure with current flow and some fairly deep water, there's going to be something.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. Assuming someone didn't have a boat, you mentioned it. Bridges, most of those accessible. Certainly all jetties, for most of the jetties and from Texas that I've been on and Florida, up the East Coast, all accessible by foot. Piers, right? There's tons of public piers. I'm even just thinking like where you are right now, right? And Luke's near Boca Grande, Little Gasparilla Island area, and there's multiple piers that are public right there. You even have those railroad trestles that people access by boat or by kayak, and you see a lot of beginners doing that, right? They anchor up. It's a form of structure. It's kind of like a bridge. There's a bunch of pilings, and there's massive grouper in there, snapper, sheep's head, so many different fun fish to catch. And if you just look around, you'd be shocked at how many of those opportunities are right there at your fingertips, where you don't need a fancy boat or any boat at all. Many of them you can access by foot or wade, or worst case, have it even a cheap kayak can get to them.
And if you're going to do it, don't make the mistake that most people do, where they're fishing like from the bridge or from the trestle, whatever the structure is, and they're on the structure with deep water underneath them, and they're casting out as far as they can, thinking that the fish are always as far away. The far, the most action is a way away from me. In most cases, around bridges and trestles and all that stuff, the best action is right down below your feet. So again, that's why you don't need anything fancy for this. You don't need to really cast far at all. Just drop it straight down and again, get it near that structure, and there's going to be some action. Even I was fishing that trestle recently. It's closed because of the hurricane, and I was skipping lures up under the trestle from a boat, and there's snook were loaded. I was almost every cast. And again, anybody who's on that casting out was totally missing all the action that would have been under their feet. So keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate things. Is
Hmm.
that's the lowest level, right? That's I guess that's the easiest entryway into getting consistent action fishing. Things starts changing when you want to start using lures. Or should we go to lures already?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. That's kind of the next moving up into kind of intermediate, if you will.
Yeah, so lures, and again, I think that another misconception is that saltwater fish, if you're going to be saltwater fishing, that you need to use live bait, and that was something that we fell for that trap. And so I was like, we were both really good at catching bass on lures, and when we switched to saltwater, we were under the impression that you have to have live baits. Now started to have and learn how to throw a cast net and finding the bait and keeping the bait alive and just doing all that stuff. And I just wish we would not have thought that, because turns out saltwater fish, not only will they hit lures, they're way more aggressive than bass. So I now rarely use, for many years I would only use live bait, and I would sit there catching bait until I had like a full live well full of them, because that's what I was told to do. And it just pains me how many hours of time I spent throwing the cast net. Catfish would come in the chum, and now I'm getting taking catfish out of the net and jellyfish, and the boat's a mess, right? And just all the extra hassle that's involved with dealing with live bait. And then once I have live bait, now I can't move around quite as quickly, and I have the live well running. I'm making more noise, and long story short, it was a huge disservice to us in our progression in fishing. So once we started realizing that hey, lures actually work pretty good, I've since learned to keep it simple. Where I mentioned before when talking about this lure, if you're a beginner, don't get this lure. Right, beginner, just keep it super simple. I recommend starting with two lures and no more. Two lures, no, until you start getting consistent action with these two lures. Don't get anything else until you do, because there's just a couple simple lures that work all season. It might not be the best option throughout the season, but it'll work. If there's a hungry fish there, you're going to catch something. And it's just a 3 to 3.5 inch, the little small paddle tail, and then the same size for a little shrimp lure. That way, if the fish are cued in on shrimp, you have that small shrimp lure. And if they're cued in on bait fish, you have that small bait fish lure. And that's it. If you just have all, then now you have to do is just match the prey. Right? If you see a bunch of birds diving on bait fish, boom, paddle tail. And if you're seeing shrimp skipping, or you see a bunch of like birds like wading in the water, feeding on the bottom, then you can safely assume, and you don't see much bait fish, then you can safely assume they're on crustaceans, and that's it. Again, something that I wish I would have learned earlier.
Hmm.
My favorite two lures for this would be the Slam Shady 2.0 for the paddle tail, and then the Prawn USA Junior for the shrimp. And this a quarter ounce jig head, and that's that like that alone. Those two lures are will work all season long. And again, we have videos on how to rig them. Rigging is very important with soft plastics, and then how to retrieve them as well. The both lures can be retrieved, and just a straight retrieve can work great, or you can twitch it. It's called the double twitch, where you kind of do two twitches and let it fall, or even just a straight reel and pause. So the lures don't require much. And again, as long as you focus on putting yourself in the right spots, with
Hmm.
those two lures, you're going to get success. But if you're not in a good spot, no matter what lure you're throwing, isn't going to work. So again, I can't. I'm embarrassed to even estimate how much money on lures and gear that I wasted just chasing the equipment and thinking that, oh, okay, I'm good. Like I know how to. I've been fish for years. I know where the fish are. I'm not catching them because I don't have the right lure. That was I just didn't I didn't truly understand how fish moved around, based on the tide cycle, based on the season, even based on like wind changes. I never thought about it.
For lures, you did mention that would be the time to kind of upgrade the gear, if you will, right?
Yep.
Line, you need to have a thinner braided line. You need to have a little bit better of a rod for castability and feel, and then a reel as well that can maybe hold up to salt water better than the combo you get at Walmart that's just not going to last as long. You thinking like the slam stick and a fuego, like something that can last a long time in terms of kind of moving up that ladder.
Yeah, so yeah, sorry, I got so on the equipment. So once you go to lures, that's when the rod reel line is very important because now it's like the light bait. You just to drop a shrimp down or even a cut bait or even a frozen shrimp. The light bait does all the action, right? Just get out of the way and let the bait do its natural thing, and a fish is going to eat it. With lures, it changes. Now you have to cast to the fish, you have to retrieve it and have good feel of your retrieve and know what you're doing, and you have to feel the strike so that you set the hook at the proper time. You can't do that with a $50 combo. It's just you can't do it. And again, just another misconception is to know the proper priority of like the rod reel line. You know which ones of those should the most money go towards. And for many years, I thought it was the reel, just because that seems to be what's marketed the hardest. And for just getting started, the rod is by far more important, really for anybody, but the rod is the most important tool because the rod is what enables the cast, right? If you have a crummy rod, like a little 2 foot Snoopy rod, you're not going to be able to cast very good at all. But if you have a nice 7.6, 7 foot, 7.6 foot fast action rod that can whip that lure, and that rod can act as a lever that just launches the lure effortlessly, you'll go from casting 50 feet to like 120 feet. And there's nothing else we can do other than getting better at finding spots. But on the equipment side, nothing much we can do to increase the odds that we're going to catch more fish with lures than to be able to cast further than before. And so the rod, especially for spinning tackle, which I recommend just sticking with until you get really advanced, but nothing we can do. I should say the rod is by far the most important aspect in the tool shed for castability. And then number two, not the reel, the reel is third. So two is line. The line is a huge deal that most people overlook. Again, going into saltwater fishing, we knew we were using 10, 15 pound line for bass fishing. And we know that, okay, there's some 20-pound snook and even bigger, bigger redfish in the areas that we were fishing. So we need to be using like 20 or 30-pound main line for saltwater. That was what was going through our heads. So we went out with all this heavy gear, and we were wondering why we were failing. And it
We're
was because,
elephant hunting.
yeah, we were elephant hunting, and it was because we couldn't deliver our lures to the fish. And with salt water, a lot of the biggest fish are up in the shallowest water, and so they get spooky. So a big fish in 2.5 feet of water is going to know our presence when we get within 60 feet of it in most cases, unless you're in like a super technical skiff. So if we can't throw it at least 100 feet, odds are we're not going to be able to reach the fish before they know dangers in the area. And so what I've since learned is number one, go with braid. Braid is incredibly just thin yet strong. There's no stretch, so you feel everything. Like to the point where I'm using this lure, or even like the paddle tails. We'll just stick with the intro lure. So either just using those paddle tails or that little prawn USA Junior, I can literally feel the pinfish tapping at it, and I can feel the difference of that little tap, in which case you don't want to set the hook because that's going to spook everything. Those little taps to then like a thump of a trout or even like a small redfish hitting. And on the thump, you set the hook. On the taps, you don't, right? You want those pinfish messing with the lure because now there's like a little feeding frenzy, and then a bigger fish that's nearby will see all the action and come in and think it's stealing the easy meal. In reality, it's your lure. Again, I take a lot of new people out fishing, and they're setting the hook like every three casts. It's like, hey, just simmer down, wait on that noticeable thump,
Simmer down now.
simmer down now, wait on that thump, and that's when the action happens. Because those people who are setting the hook all the time, nothing naturally will move that fast for like a whole hook set. So it just, it spooks everything away, and now you got to start over the retrieve.
Simmer
No,
da
no.
nah. Simmer da nah.
And so as far as budget wise, like in general, for again, focuses on the rod. So I generally at the lowest case, I'll usually go with like $100-ish rod. If you go down to like the $50, that's when you have those really flimsy rods. I recommend staying away. If again going after lures, I recommend staying away from the rods that are marketing themselves as unbreakable. Yes, there are some rods that are unbreakable, and the reason is because they're just so flimsy they can be bent like over. They can be almost be tied in a knot, and it's cool that doesn't break. But being that flimsy pretty much guarantees you can't feel anything at all. So like the nicer rods are actually breakable, and that's just how it is. That's just nature of the game. So that $100 price point in most cases will deliver a good rod that can feel and cast well. That also can take some abuse. So like the slam stick, for example, is that case. That's a little bit more. It's like a $150 range for members, which is by far the best $150 rod on the market. It's usually 200, but it's marked down for members. So that would be one of those rods that has very good feel, while still having a paint job that makes sure that it can have some weights hit it, and even hit a low hanging bridge or two, and have some kids bang up on it
I'll do
and
that.
still not break.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like a TFO Pro, that's a rod that I've used for many years. That's just over $100. That's an excellent rod. That's the one I was using when I caught that snook off a balcony. So it's again, $100-ish rod that delivers good results. And then for the ultimate, again, on the advanced side, I would start recommending the slot machine. But if you're just getting new, a rod like the slot machine is just not probably too early, because it requires taking good care of it. But if you do take care of it, that rod will take care of you. That is by far the best rod I've ever used. And so comparing that to the reel, or I should say the line, again, a 10-pound braid is just a good all-purpose line. And Daiwa J Braid 8 grand has been the best overall that I've tested as far as testing the actual breaking strength. Number one, the castability, number two, and then abrasion, which is a little bit tougher to evaluate. But the J Braid, as far as the castability to strength ratio, is the best I've tested. We have a prototype that matches it, but as far as just overall lines that are on market today, that one it's impressive. It's like beats Power Pro and all that stuff. Um, I do recommend 8-strand braid versus 4-strand braid as well, especially saltwater, because that 4-strand is coarse, and even doing some testing of underwater analysis, like watching trout hit lures. I was noticing on the camera, which isn't designed for sound, I could hear that 4-strand line going through the guides, even when the camera was like 100 feet out. And so once I heard that, I was like, oh my gosh, like this coarse line is creating vibrations throughout the entire water spectrum. And again, any smart fish like a snook with that black line that enables them to feel the faintest things in the water. Like I was just letting every single smart snook know that I was in the area because I was using that coarse line. So use a very thin and smooth line, a braided line, and you're going to increase your results on quantity, more importantly, quality as well. And then for leader, I just use mono. The kind of the trend, or the whatever the marketing these days seems to all go to fluoro. Again, I've tested a lot of lines. Regular mono, it has better results than fluoro. So
Save you some money
yeah, the braid will be about $20 for 150 yards, and the mono will be like $3 for a 50-yard spool. So
for a
we're not talking.
lifetime supply.
Yeah. And yeah, and even on the you don't have to get the small spools, you can get the full spools as well. Then on the reel side, whatever's left in the budget. So I used to overspend on reels. Now, even though I'm like fishing full time as like for a living, I still rarely use reels that are over like 150 bucks. Whereas before I was buying $200 or more, like at minimum. So reels, just whatever's left in the budget after the rod and the line. So like the Legalis is great. It's like 79 bucks. The Regal is even lower than that, still gets the job done. Just know that the cheaper reels won't last as long. So usually after years, you usually get your money's worth, kind of regardless of what price point you go to. But I've caught many quality fish on 79 or less dollar reels. So you don't have to go big, but it definitely helps with longevity.
Yeah. And a lot of these things, I think there's this misconception that you're going to buy a reel and it's going to last 10 years. I mean, especially if you buy a $80 reel. No, it might only last it might only last 6 months if you don't treat it right or happen to, dunk it a little bit. But just think about what I always remind people because I've seen some people get mad. Oh man, I only got to use this 4 or 5 times and only spend $60 on it. Like, think how much it costs just to take your family to the movies for that one day of entertainment. You got six big uses out of this. Like, I'm not trying to say that you should expect just to kind of buy a reel and burn it, but I want to say that because I've heard that from so many people. They buy a cheaper reel and think it's going to last for a year, or I mean, years and years or a decade. Like that's just not the case, and that is why I do buy the $900 one. Not to say you shouldn't, but it does have a lifetime guarantee, and every time there's an issue, send it in. They either replace it or fix it. So I do like it for that. However, if it gets stolen or you lose it, you got luck. But as long as I hold on to that little precious little thing,
Yeah,
let's talk
no,
about because I think the other question I'm sure people are asking, okay, cool, that's all the equipment I need. What about to get to the fish, the kayaks, the boats, etc.? I think you would probably agree that especially if you're starting out, don't go super expensive. Start small, start easy. I mean, even with a kayak, start with the cheap one. You can always resell it on Facebook Marketplace and then continue to upgrade. Some of these people buy the first one, it's $5,000 fully loaded Hobie kayak. It's absolutely cool, super comfortable, but I think might be disappointed if you don't know how to use it and you get real frustrated and you spend all that money on something before you got good at just catching fish.
yeah, and just like I mentioned before, a lot of the biggest fish are in the shallowest water for saltwater, which is awesome because that opens up the playing field for people without any boat or any kayak at all. So you don't need a boat. You don't even kid yourself thinking that you have to get a kayak or a boat to get started. Even a member, Waiter Dave, he's a perfect example. He's catching some of the biggest fish of anybody on a consistent basis, and just like his name is, he goes wade fishing. He used to have a boat and he sold it, and he's having better luck by foot, and to the point where now he's guiding people by foot. So yeah, so just old sneakers is all you really need to get to the fish in most cases. Don't go barefoot because we have stingrays to be mindful of. We have a lot of sharp objects on the ground like oysters. So get some shoes. Again, old shoes. I just use old tennis shoes in many cases, but now they sell like wading boots, usually like 50, $60 for a good pair. But you want to have like some solid rubber on the bottom for safety of your feet. Otherwise, get out there and we'll start walking. And again, just for at least all around Florida and most other states in the Southeast, there's a lot of really good public access. And you can, with the, again, in the fishing school in the intermediate level, we start showing that how to use online maps to quickly, like in under 5 minutes, quickly go through your area, or maybe you're vacationing somewhere, go through that whatever area that you might be able to fish, and quickly find spots that you can access by land. And part of that, we have a layer that's public. It's called the public land layer, and it does just that. It highlights all the public land. So you literally get on that software, look at the map of whatever area you're going to, and tap that section, and it'll highlight in green all the different areas you can access that's on the water. And then just use the lessons we teach to find the publicly accessible zones that have good looking water nearby based on the conditions. Again, that will teach you as well. It all goes back to learning fish behavior. Once you know the fish behavior, you can quickly find good spots to fish, whether you're fishing from land or in a kayak if you want to get a little bit more water you can access, and then obviously by a boat will give you the most access. So yeah, don't kid yourself by thinking that you can't get started until you have something to get around, and you can just go by foot.
Mhm.
That's actually what I recommend starting with. Is It's way easier and way less things can go wrong if you just simply go wade fishing.
Or off a pier, or jetty, or anything.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Cool. Anything else? I think this is super helpful in terms of just answering that. It's a tough one it's just like saying how much should a house cost. It just depends
Right.
on your needs and your budget, but just to get started, I think we really crush it. And if you want to go further, definitely get in the interactive fishing school. We use the word interactive because it is, as we mentioned earlier, if you want to get good at any sport or hobby, you get a coach. You got Coach Luke who's in there answering questions every single day. So you actually get to ask questions in there like you would on an online college course, and you have the professor helping you out, and sometimes even going out and filming new videos for it. So that's all right there. You can find it at community.saltshore.com. If you're already a member, you just look for the fishing school. It's right there, and it's beginner, intermediate, and advanced. So it's broken out into those different levels. And the whole goal is that you start where you are and you move your way down. I'm saying down because that's what it looks like online, but it's really you're trying to go up to advanced. It's super, super helpful. We've even had some pretty experienced people have gone in there and had a couple aha moments, right? Like guys who are really good fly anglers and stuff saying, "Oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that." So I would encourage you, regardless of your skill level, to get in there. Doesn't take that long. It doesn't take 4 years like a college degree. It's a pretty quick curriculum, but really, really powerful.
Yeah, and so again, just the entry level. So live bait, focus on just catching anything. The entry point is like $50, right? Just for all this stuff you need. You don't need anything fancy. With lures, it's gonna be more like 150, $200. And that'll get you a nice rod, a nice reel that you can use for many years. And again, the two lures that you need. And don't spend anything else on additional lures until you start getting good at catching this fish. And what you'll see again, as soon as you start getting better about understanding fish behavior and putting yourself in the right spot based on the conditions, you'll see that even just with using just nothing more than a couple lures, you're going to be catching way more fish than most of your friends who spent 10, 20 times more money and are getting less results. So yeah, I just highly recommend just go through that curriculum. It'll be well worth the time. It's again, it's like maybe 3, 4 hours per skill level. It's not much time at all.
Cool. So
Not
that's
even that.
all.
Probably more like 2 hours.
Yep. And if you're not a member and you want access to more of this, go to saltshore.com. You see a place to join the Insider Club. Come join us. It's completely risk free, and we'd love to have you in there. Otherwise, we'll talk to you on the next episode. Peace. We out.
See you.